Hello everybody, and welcome to this special edition of Pulpit of the Last Days. Now, in this video, I'd like to discuss the Passion of Christ from a little-known perspective, the one that Jesus himself used in the Emmaus Discourse in Luke chapter 24. Everything about his passion was foretold by the prophets in stunning detail, including his very thoughts and feelings in his most profound times of silence. Through the writings of the apostles, the story of Jesus' passion has become widely known, and yet his very own perspective, his personal experience and all that, has remained hidden throughout the ages. "I will no longer talk much with you," said he, "for the ruler of this world is coming, and he has nothing in me." As his suffering began, Jesus faced great distress, isolation, and pain while remaining silent before his accusers. Yet in his heart he was musing, and his thoughts were passionately searching. "I was mute with silence. I held my peace even from good, and my sorrow was stirred up. My heart was hot within me. While I was musing, the fire burned." The prophets spoke in great detail over the sufferings of Christ and of the glories that would follow. Of this they made diligent inquiry, searching out the insights that were shown to them. So poignant was the understanding that they received, so deeply moving the revelation, so profound the impact on their very own souls, that most of the prophecy they gave was rendered in first person, as if Jesus himself was speaking through them. And indeed it was Jesus speaking through them by the Spirit of Christ who is in them, that through their prophetic voice he, though silent in those desperate hours themselves, may yet speak of those things afterwards. And this is just what he did through the Emmaus Discourse. 3 days had passed since Jesus was crucified and buried, but beginning at sunrise on that third day, strange reports made it back to the apostles. Jesus was risen from the dead. Further reports reached them all that morning, but Jesus had not yet appeared to the apostles themselves. Later that day, 2 of his disciples, on their way to a nearby city called Emmaus, discussed these things. And as they walked, Jesus himself drew near and began to speak with them, though their eyes were held so they would not recognize him. Now, as they discussed the events of the Passion, Jesus showed them the same things from the Old Testament scriptures. Here, those silent musings which had stirred his sorrow and which had caused his heart to burn within him found open words at last, as he recalled his sufferings and glory in speaking to these 2. Ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. And just as those words had burned within his heart and had burned within the hearts of the prophets, the same effect would be kindled in the hearts of those who heard him. And they said to one another, "Did not our heart burn within us while he talked to us on the road and while he opened the scriptures to us?" And so this sort of presentation can really affect someone. The prophecy of Jesus in his passion is so extensive and so detailed that one may actually string those scriptures together like stringing pearls to retell the entire passion narrative from Jesus' own point of view. And when this is done, the result is about 7 chapters in length, and a very special quality attends it. "Indeed, the hour is coming, yes, has now come, that you will be scattered, each to his own, and will leave me alone. And yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me." Now, Jesus may have been silent toward man, but the Father was with him, and so most of those silent musings in his heart were directed heavenward, as if in response to the Father's word. Now, here's a few examples of how they matched. These all come from Isaiah 53, beginning again with the silence of Christ. The Father speaks. "He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth." The Son responds, "I said, I will guard my ways, lest I sin with my tongue. I will restrain my mouth with a muzzle while the wicked are before me. I was mute with silence. I held my peace even from good, and my sorrow was stirred up. My heart was hot within me. While I was musing, the fire burned. And again, as Jesus was scourged, the Father speaks. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. The Son responds, I gave my back to those who struck me, and my cheeks to those who plucked out the beard. I did not hide my face from shame and spitting. And again, in the story of Peter's denials, with a good example of stringing pearls in the response, the Father speaks. He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Jesus responds, My loved ones and my friends stand aloof from my plague, and my kinsmen stand afar off. I also have become a reproach to them. When they look at me, they shake their heads. You have put away my acquaintances far from me. You have made me an abomination to them. I am shut up, and I cannot get out. My eye wastes away because of affliction. Now, because of this unique quality in the prophecy, the Emmaus discourse may have resembled a dialogue in many places. And of course, Jesus had appeared to them in the form of a stranger who was unfamiliar with these events. Therefore, the events themselves must have been introduced to the conversation by the two disciples. Now, this suggests a much broader character to this dialogue, with significant participation from those two disciples in introducing events, in asking questions, and possibly even in making a few points of their own. Now, if you'll look over my right shoulder, you'll see a poster for a currently unpublished manuscript entitled The Road to Emmaus, subtitled The Messiah Speaks. Now, this is a scriptural novel with all of the features we've just discussed. Quite honestly, this is my favorite book in the entire world next to the Bible itself, and Nancy would have told you the same things. This manuscript tracks very closely with the actual events, and it's only a novel in the sense of a poetic license that is used to bridge the gaps and promote the flow of the story. Now, in almost every respect, it's ready to publish right now. It's written, edited, typeset, illustrated, captioned, its cover is designed, and its permissions are secured. Basically, it needs an ISBN number. But there's a bigger reason why I haven't taken the final step toward publication, and maybe one of you can help with that. You see, as much as I like this book, I've always felt that the best use of this material would be in a screenplay. Never before has a media production told the story of the Passion of Jesus from the standpoint of his resurrection, and especially not with the insights of using his own words. But cracking into the Emmaus discourse allows you to do that. Now, I see great potential for that, and I've been praying about two possibilities. Now, in 2025, a sequel to the movie The Passion of the Christ will begin production. This sequel will focus on the 3 days in which Jesus was dead and the activities that were taking place in the spirit world during those days. Now, this is a period that theologians refer to as the harrowing of hell. In modern times, we tend to view this period a little academically. We know the sign of the prophet Jonah, that Jesus would spend 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, and so he did. We know that he would bruise the serpent's head, which was the very first prophecy given about Jesus back in Genesis 3. We know that he would make an open show over the enemy, triumphing over him in it, for it was here that he would defeat all principality and power through his cross and through his resurrection. But for those who died before Jesus had even appeared, his purpose in the spirit world meant far, far more. For most of them, the prophecy of the Messiah's coming to them from the land of the living, from beyond the grave, was the only light in a world of eternal darkness, the great and last hope for them all, forever. In the Old Testament prophecy, we see their desperate perspective in significant detail. Now, this manuscript has an entire chapter dedicated to the events of those 3 days. It's coming totally from the scriptures, basically in a dialogue between the Son and the Father. So if anyone out there knows the writers or the producers of The Passion of the Christ Part 2, please consider mentioning this to them to see if they would be interested in examining this chapter. Now, I'll give them permission to use it freely. I'll even sign a waiver if they like. Just have them contact me. I'm not so hard to find if you know where to look online. Now, the other possibility that I have in mind for a screenplay is with an ongoing series called The Chosen. Now, I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with this. At the time of this recording, they're just finishing up their 5th season, which is about the Last Supper. Their 6th season will be about the Passion of Christ, and their 7th and final season will be about his resurrection, which happens to be the same material that we are covering in The Road to Emmaus, the Messiah Speaks. And the approach that we've used in our novel is highly compatible with their approach. Nancy and I were working together on this manuscript in 2019 when a friend of ours told us about the first 4 episodes of The Chosen, which had just been released. We watched them and quickly became huge fans. And in those days, we realized that our project might eventually be helpful to them and what they were doing. So in a similar way, if anyone out there knows the writers or the producers of The Chosen, please consider sharing this video with them. I will gladly let them adopt any of this material they like, no strings attached, and I'll even sign a waiver if they like. But in their particular case, there may be an even bigger opportunity. The Chosen could go ahead and finish their series with the resurrection, just as they've currently planned it, and then return a year or so later with a full-length complementary movie based more specifically on the Emmaus Discourse. This movie would review the Passion from the standpoint of the resurrection in the words of Jesus himself, just as it was presented to his disciples on that day. And it was repeated later that night to the apostles. But from that day to this one, I do not believe it has ever been seen on the earth again. Now, they already have all the actors, all the costumes, all the sets, and a lot of experience. And by then, they'll have a lot of film clips from their final 2 seasons, which could naturally reappear in a production of this nature, since the Emmaus Discourse is essentially a review of those events. But just as importantly, a loyal fan base that has reached the end of a beloved 7-year journey would be rewarded with a grand encore that bears a unique evangelic nature. Now, there would be other benefits, of course, but I leave those to them. Again, just have them contact me. I'm not so hard to find online. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this video from Pulpit of the Last Days, short essays about the end-time church as foretold in the New Testament. If you did enjoy it, please go ahead and click on that thumbs up button. For previous videos, check out our website at pulpitofthelastdays.com. Also, we post new videos weekly, so if you'd like to receive more videos like this one, all you need to do is subscribe.